SEC, SEC, horn sideways, SEC. Hi, Bryan and Ryan here. I'm Brian Houston with the LSU cap on, the dominant conference. And that's Ryan Peterson, who hates all things SEC and wonders what's going to happen. Is Kansas and Wichita State going to join a conference together now? Or,
Kansas would never allow that. So
they may not have a choice.
Yeah, we'll see.
There just may not be a choice. Okay, it's been a while since we've talked.
Mm-hmm.
And a few things have happened since we've last talked, Ryan.
Just a little bit.
The entire world of college football has exploded. And by the time all the shrapnel lands, we have no idea what it's going to look like. But the main thing is, last week during the SEC media days, the bombshell was dropped that Oklahoma and Texas were in conversations with the Southeastern Conference about leaving the Big 12 and joining the SEC. How they managed to keep that quiet for 6 months in this world that we live in of leakage and sources say, and nobody can keep their mouths shut, is amazing. But nonetheless, it went from 0 to 1,000 miles an hour that fast. And as we speak today, the official request by Oklahoma and Texas has gone to Greg Sankey for an invitation into the Southeastern Conference by Oklahoma and Texas. Thoughts?
Oh boy. Shocked was one. I sit here, Brian, and I'm like, how clueless is the commissioner of the Big 12, Bowlesby?
Bowel is a good
that's
word.
That's what he's because he's having bowel movements.
Yes. Well, either that or it's blockage and it's backed up.
How clueless can he be for this to have been going on for 6 months to a year and no one knows? Like, everyone's just completely blindsided. This was not brought up at all at Big 12 media days. Like, no one had any idea. But I think the story is just fascinating because there's so many different layers. And I mean, obviously it's going to change college football forever. I don't see how the Big 12 can survive it. And we can get into what that's going to look like in terms of Texas and OU. The thing that was funny to me, and I don't have a dog in this fight. Texas over the last decade, Texas has the 6th best record in the Big 12. They're not even in the top half of the Big 12. And now they're going to go play in the SEC. So
yes.
From that perspective, I'm like, what? And then from Oklahoma, the funny thing I feel like with Oklahoma is they had kind of built themselves a nice little perch in that Big 12 where they were normally getting into the playoff, even if people thought they didn't deserve it because of their schedule. They were normally getting in with the loss, and they were finding themselves at least in the playoff every year. They were having number 1 picks, Heisman Trophy winners. They had found a nice the Big 12 was working for them. And now, I mean, that's not going to happen in the SEC. That's not to say they're not going to keep winning, but they're not going to win at the clip they have been. So it's interesting to me that these schools are basically choosing, they're willing to lose for, I guess, the money that's going to come with the SEC, what it means to be in the SEC. But I just don't see how this ends well for them competitively, because Texas can't even win in the Big 12. How are they going to win in the SEC? And Oklahoma, they're not going to. I don't know. It will help recruiting, I suppose, but I still don't see Texas making it. Texas hasn't been relevant in the last decade. I don't see them being relevant now because of this.
What I find funny about this is the people that say this is going to help Texas's recruiting. If you need to join the Southeastern Conference to keep kids in your own backyard from leaving the state, you've got a major problem, and it's a lot deeper than the Big 12. First of all, that should not even be an issue. That wasn't an issue back when Mac Brown was here. He got the pick of the litter every year. Didn't
And
do anything.
Oklahoma was still recruiting well. So, I mean,
I mean,
yeah.
ultimately, Ryan, the bottom line is they chose money over competition. I think Oklahoma's going to compete just fine. I don't think they're going to miss a step. I think that they've proven. I mean, they've proven it with the schedule they play. The non-conference schedule. They've always been playing the big boys. They'll go play Ohio State. They'll go play Notre Dame. They'll go play Clemson. I mean, they'll play anybody in non-conference. The difference is going to be, how do you hold up playing 9 games against people that have the same level of talent that you have? That's where you're going to find out. That's where the rubber's going to hit the road, because it's a grind. It is really a battle of survival in the SEC. And so that's one thing that Oklahoma's going to have to brace for. I think they'll handle it. Texas, I mean, I think that they can compete. They certainly have the resources, but it just proves to you once again, you can have all the money in the world, but that hasn't helped them at all in the last decade in any sport except baseball. So the thing about it is 2 things. It shows you the lack of leadership in the Big 12. That all they do and all they've ever done under Bowlesby is react. Mm-hmm. They've played with a catcher's mitt. Okay. Yeah, they never look forward. They never think big picture. They are never, and then Greg Sankey's sitting there going, hey guys, we're sitting here on this cash cow, but we can get better and we can dominate. And the other thing that it tells me is that the death of the NCAA is very near. And so the Big 12 leadership has killed the Big 12, and the NCAA's lack of leadership is just about to sink their ship as well. Greg Sankey's about to be the czar of college football here pretty soon. I think, number one, couple of things. I don't think Oklahoma initiated this. I think Oklahoma doesn't have a history of being devious and behind the scenes. Texas does. So I absolutely believe Texas went to Oklahoma and said, hey, this is what we're thinking. Come with us. Because they know they have literally been dragging the rest of the Big 12 behind them all these years. That if they know that the stability of the conference is directly dependent upon them being a part of the conference. Without Texas and Oklahoma, it's over. They're not a Power 5 conference anymore. There are no Power 5 schools that are going to join that conference. So I think that all you're going to do is see every man for himself trying to find some place to land. And the schools I think are going to suffer the most in this situation are going to be the private schools. Baylor, TCU. I think they've got some big headaches. I think Texas Tech's in trouble.
So that's my next thing. So, look, we know what's going to happen with Texas and OU. They're out. But what happens to these other 8 schools? It's kind of fun. And it shows you, Brian, how football carries everything and how little basketball matters. Baylor just won the national championship. Kansas has one of the best basketball brands in college hoops. Doesn't matter. What is most likely to happen? Because I've heard debates. I've been listening to every show, talking heads about what's the most likely outcome for these 8 schools left over. Do they try to get like a Houston or a Central Florida? But my thing is, what is that going to add? That's not going to add anything. It doesn't make it a Power 5 league. Is it more likely that they're going to go elsewhere? But the thing is the Pac-12 going to want any of these schools? Is the Big 10 going to want a Kansas or an ACC? Are they going to want any of these?
Here's the deal. As far as the Pac-12, they're not dealing from a real position of strength either. It's not like they've got great schools across the board doing great things in their conference. So adding Texas markets could be an advantage for them, I think. I've seen already Oklahoma trying to make overtures toward the Big 10, Oklahoma State rather. Yeah. I definitely think that Kansas could be a candidate to join the Big 10 and get destroyed in football every year, just like they do in the Big 12. But the basketball will be fantastic.
Right.
I've seen West Virginia go into the ACC. But as far as the Big 12 being able to reach out and bring in schools like Cincinnati and Central Florida, that moves no needle at all.
Is it more likely that is Baylor and TCU, is it more likely that they would have to go to the American with
It's
Houston and Central Florida?
it's very possible, Ryan. It's very possible. And the sad thing about it is that TCU has gone this route. They've been in 7 different conferences since the Southwest Conference blew up. And they
Yeah.
worked so hard to get back to Power 5 status in the Big 12. And now who knows if they're going to be able to maintain that status, because, do they get a chance to go to the Pac-12? Do they get a chance to go to the Big 10 or the ACC? I mean, I just don't know. And Baylor's the one that is really has a quandary, because Baylor has been a football school. It's just recently that their basketball program has taken off like it has. And there are schools like Villanova that thrive. They do just fine without football, but that's not Baylor. That's not their brand. So I don't know what happens to those guys. I really think what ends up happening to them, my prediction is that teams like Baylor and Texas Tech and TCU end up joining the American Conference with Houston and all these other schools, and they just have to, hope that the expansion of the playoff gives them at least a chance to get in there, which is really frustrating, I know, for the fans of those two schools, because it was just a few years ago that TCU and Baylor got screwed out of a playoff berth because they weren't a name brand.
The funny thing in all this, though, is, and obviously we're just making things up, hypotheticals.
So is everybody else.
The funny thing is, in my opinion, like if you put a TCU and a Baylor in the American with Central Florida, with South Florida, with U of H, with SMU, I think, you could get to a point where that is as good as the Pac-12, though. I mean, the Pac-12 hasn't been worth a darn in several years. USC, I don't know what's happened to that program. It's just, I just think it's weird because, like you said, the Pac-12 is not exactly in a position of power. And I don't even feel like the ACC is that good. I mean, outside of Clemson, what has the ACC been? To me, it's been the SEC and then the Big Ten, and then kind of like everyone else is kind of muh. So I saw Jay Billis saying that he thinks the ACC should reach out to the SEC about them joining forces. But what does the ACC really have outside of Clemson?
Well, the other story, the other rumor that I've read about was that the SEC is not done, that they may try to go to as many as 20 schools. And I've seen really crazy things. The not so crazy things are that the SEC would reach out and say, Florida State, Clemson, come over here. Okay. Wow. But they also said there's the story out there that, hey, let's reach out to Ohio State and Michigan while we're at it. Now, I don't see that happening, but to be honest with you, when you see how weak the leadership is in the Big Ten right now, because you got a guy that was trying to lead him into taking the year off for COVID, and that blew up in his face.
Right.
So his leadership skills are not really that strong at this point either. So I don't know what the grand plan is. As an SEC fan, I'd like to see it sit now at 16 and just stop. Okay. But I could absolutely see the SEC saying, we got room for 2 more. Come on down, Clemson and Florida State. You fit. You are a fit with our conference. Clemson, I think, used to be a member of the SEC way back when. North Carolina, might be a candidate for that, except if you're talking about football driving the bus.
Right.
But, as far as what these remaining Texas schools do, I mean, they just don't bring the eyeballs.
Yeah.
Fort Worth is part of the Dallas market. So you can say technically that DFW market is still open to TCU, but I just don't know how that drives the viewership. The difference between the AAC and the Pac-12 is the brands, USC, UCLA, Oregon.
Right.
One of the things I heard yesterday, I was on the radio and we were talking with the guy from Sikkim Sports, Kevin Longquist is a friend of mine. And he was saying that maybe the possibility would be, if the Big 12 is going to survive at all, would be to reach out to some of the former members like Colorado, like Nebraska. I mean, because now the reason they left was because of Texas. Texas is gone.
Right.
Now, and Nebraska was extremely unhappy with the Big Ten and the way they handled the COVID situation. I mean, they wanted to go to war over whether they were going to play games or not. But you could see if the Big 12, with real leadership, if the Big 12 could say, okay, we're going to bring Colorado back, we're going to bring Nebraska back, some of those schools, or maybe the Arizona schools could come into the conference. Maybe they get smart and reach out and get BYU before
Yeah,
Pac-12 goes.
absolutely. BYU would be the one that I think could be a good addition that hasn't technically been in a Power Five.
So I mean, right now, I mean, it is the wild, wild west, and I mean, we're watching a grand game of musical chairs, and at some point, the music's going to stop, and who's going to be left without a chair? And I see a lot of schools that are getting ready to get left without a chair and end up having to go down a step in level of competition, in TV rights, in everything, the status that they fought for all these years. I could see it very, it blowing up on them. And it's, I mean, the Big 12, instead of responding back when they were losing membership by continuing to try to grab and gain membership,
they just stayed with what it.
Oh, let's just suck it up and stay with 10. That way we can split all the money. Well, what you did is that's why the ESPN and Fox don't want to renew or don't want to renegotiate the TV contract, because they don't bring any eyeballs. Unless Oklahoma and Texas were involved, they were games. Now, they were fun games for us. We watch them, we see, but for the nation at large, they don't care. And unfortunately, that's where we are right now. The rich are going to get richer, and these schools that have been literally carried financially by Texas and Oklahoma are either going to have to find another home that keeps them in a Power 5 situation, or they may be in a situation where they got no choice but to go to the AAC or Conference USA or whatever.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting too to see how quickly will this happen. Obviously, there's still technically 4 years left that Texas and OU would have to stay in the conference. Are they going to be willing to pay the astronomical amount of money they're going to have to pay to get out? Because the Big 12 isn't going to do them any favors, obviously. And then once that happens, because I was hearing today, ESPN, there's language in their television contract with the Big 12, because I think they average like $37 million each school would get from that contract, that can drop down to like as low as 8 or 9 million, depending on if specific teams left the conference. And like you said, there aren't any programs left in the league that are going to bring in the eyeballs.
That's the point. Bowlesby and the Big 12 have been in a position of weakness, and they've given into those deals and those clauses, and now they're screwed. And that's the thing, there's no way that Texas and Oklahoma are going to spend 4 more years in the Big 12. That's going to get negotiated out. Somehow ESPN and Fox are going to get involved in this, and that's going to get figured out.
What do you give it, 2 years?
I think 1 more year at the most.
1 year, wow.
I think 2022, I think they're playing football in the SEC. I really do. There's no way. First of all, the acrimony in conference meetings is going to be such. I don't see anything productive coming from that. And on top of that, that's 4 years of just complete uncertainty for these other schools who are all going to be trying to find homes. I just don't see the Big 12 staying together. They just aren't in a position of strength to do that. So I don't know. Here's the thing. Here's another example of just how pathetic the leadership is in the Big 12, though. As of Sunday, they were offering Texas and Oklahoma bigger shares of the pie to get them to stay. Okay, that's great. That puts a Band-Aid on it for 2 more years until Texas and Oklahoma say, we're still not getting quite enough.
Yeah.
I mean, that's ridiculous. That's exactly the problem with this conference. They come from a position of no strength. Oklahoma and Texas set they make the rules. It's Oklahoma and Texas with their own set of separate rules, and then everybody else fends for themselves and gets the scraps. The thing I love about all of this, Ryan, from my own devious standpoint, is I am so very excited to see the first time Texas walks into an SEC meeting moaning about horns down, how they get laughed out of the room. the first time they come in and say, we make so much money, we ought to get a bigger slice of the pie, how they get laughed out of the room. We've got this Longhorn network. How long that thing's going to last before it's sucked up and becomes SEC Network 2? Because there will not be a Longhorn network. Texas is about to get in for a rude awakening, because the SEC doesn't play this. We do everything for these other 15 schools. Texas, you get your own set of rules. Vanderbilt gets the same thing Texas does. That's not going to change. It is not going to change. They're not going to get favored nation status in the SEC. They're just one of the boys. And one of the things that Ross Bjork said, the A&M athletic director, and what he was concerned about was, and he kept using these words. He says, we need to have a sit down with these schools, and we need to talk about teamwork, collaboration, and working together. Those are three things that Texas has no knowledge of. They've never done it.
And they haven't had to.
No.
They haven't had to. Yeah.
People have just laid down and taken it.
Or left.
That's not going to happen. That is not going to happen in the SEC. And they're not going to walk in and dictate their terms. So it's going to be funny to watch that culture shock happening and see how the big money Longhorn, folks with the big wallets like it when everybody else in the conference has basically got the same position of power. They may not have quite as much money, but it's, Florida's not going to give in to Texas. Alabama's not going to say, oh, sure, we'll give you a little bit more. LSU, tell them to go to hell in 9 different languages. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, no, and A&M doesn't even want them there to begin with, so they're not going to do me any favors either.
Here's another theory for you. One other thing, and then I'm going to shut up and I'll let you talk. I believe that noise that was made by A&M, the outrage and all this stuff that came down last week, and how, number one, why was Ross Bjork at the SEC media days in the first place? ADs never go to media days. Okay. They knew ahead of time what was getting ready to happen. They had to make that stink to keep their fan base happy. They had to say the things that they knew their fan base wanted to hear. Okay. Because you notice they made a lot of noise for about 24 hours. And then they started backing off and saying, well, I guess we'll just have to accept it. And the president put out the statement already. We plan on being with the SEC for a long time and all this kind of other stuff. I think that whole thing was orchestrated.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought about that. But from a fan perspective, I would think that fans at both schools would have to acknowledge it's going to be better if they're playing. I think, it's silly that they haven't been. But I think Texas is in, I just feel like they're in or maybe it's not a rude awakening. Maybe they know exactly what they're doing, but they just want to make sure that they're getting a big fat piece of that SEC pie that's going to keep getting bigger. And the television contract now is going to be even more massive with these two brands adding to the league. Could they add more? Who knows? But with the 16 teams that they'll have with those two, man, it's basically a minor league for the NFL at this point, and everybody else is just playing for crumbs.
I sincerely believe you could see, if we have a 12-team playoff, you could see 6 teams from the SEC get into the playoff.
Oh yeah,
I don't believe that.
And especially if the Big 12, you're not going to have, you wonder too. Remember in the language that it said the top 4 Power 5 conferences would get in, and someone was going to get left out. Did they know that the Big 12 wasn't going to be around by the time? And I also read today that because of this, the college football playoff will probably be delayed at least another couple years, because they're going to want to see how the leagues end up lining up. Does a Texas Tech go to the Pac-12? Do some of these schools go to the Big Ten? Or we need to see what the power conferences are going to look like first before we make the change.
Yeah, I think that process is going to speed up pretty quickly. I honestly don't believe you're going to see a delay in the playoff. I just think that the chairs are going to move a lot faster now that we know Texas and Oklahoma are gone. And then you got to see what the next move is by the SEC and what the Big 12 is going to do. Okay. All of that's been fun. I love talking about it because that's my game. I love college football. I love the Southeastern Conference. And so I'm excited to see what all this is going to do. I mean, there's still so many things to figure out in terms of how you're going to break this. Are you going to keep it Eastern and Western divisions? Or Alabama and Auburn going to move to the East? Are they going to use this 4-pod system, which I kind of like, where it gets everybody playing everybody within a 4-year period? I like that a lot better than what we currently have there. Let's talk a little bit about the Olympics. I have been watching. I love watching the swimming races. That's
Yeah,
always
I love
fun.
swimming.
So I love that kind of stuff. But the Simone Biles thing, she came into these Olympics as the greatest Olympic gymnast in the world. And she has really struggled by her standards, had a terrible night on the vault, and then pulled out of the team competition for the remainder of the Olympics and cited that it wasn't an injury, it was mental health. She said she was under an incredible amount of stress and pressure, said she felt weirder than she's ever felt in an event before, things like that. We've been hearing so much of this since COVID hit, and the kind of things that kids are having to go through right now. What are your thoughts about all this?
I don't know enough about it because I got to be honest. So earlier today, I had saw that she had pulled out. That's one of the frustrating thing I've had with the Olympics is I haven't been able to figure out, okay, what am I watching that's live? What's already happened? Right. There's a huge time difference. That's been the one thing I've loved about the swimming is it's been live. We're watching it live in the evening, but gymnastics, I've been busy working and I hadn't seen what was going on. And then I see that she pulled out and I'm like, what do you mean she pulled out? Like, is she hurt? And I couldn't really find what the problem was. And then I read this afternoon that what you had said, mental health, she was feeling anxiety, whatever it may be. I don't ever want to really comment on anyone's mental health. I don't know. I will say though, as someone that competed through high school in athletics, it was a little, again, I don't want to question what her mental health was. I don't know what she was going through, but it was bizarre to me that at the Olympics, which happen only every 4 years, it's the team portion. And you say, yeah, guys, I can't do this. I mean, I'm trying to think of when have I seen something like that? She's the face of the U.S. Olympic team, not gymnastics. She's the face of the U.S. Olympic team, period. So I do hope she's okay. I think she's one of the greatest, if not the greatest of all time. I would think it has to be really something serious for her to pull out like that. But yeah, it was a little jarring for me to see that she would pull out. It's the Olympics, it's the team portion. And then apparently she's still possibly gonna do the all around later. But yeah, it was weird to me.
They did leave it open that they're going to go day to day and evaluate her and then see how she feels. I do find I'm like you when you only have the shot once every 4 years and you put everything into it. Now that's not necessarily the case with gymnastics because they've been competing for the last 4 years in the world championships and the national championships and all of that. So and based on the reaction, she's out there pulling for her team. The team seems supportive of her. You're not hearing anything in terms of resentment or anything like that. It is strange, but I'm like you. I'm not about, in this day and age, I'm not about to question the motives or what's going on. I just find it, it's disappointing because obviously you want to see her perform, and she was one of the main draws and one of the big storylines of the whole games. And now she may not finish out, and that's hard to watch. The other thing that we're learning is in basketball, the United States has lost whatever edge it has because it's such an international game now. And we saw the USA go absolutely stone cold in the second half against France and lose. And you see the international players who are playing on NBA teams, quite frankly, kicking the US's butt. And I don't see that going away anytime soon. They seem to be just better fundamentally in a lot of ways. What do you think?
I think there is some truth to that. I think a lot of, U.S. basketball is just so much isolation ball. But in my opinion, the guy that I don't know how he continues to get a pass. He's a jerk in press conferences, and he has not been a good coach in a long time. Popovich should not have the job. It was a mistake to give it to him. Bryan, we sit here and we talk about, oh, everyone's caught up to the U.S. basketball. Well, from the end of 2004 to now, the U.S. had not lost an Olympic basketball game with Mike Krzyzewski coaching. So obviously he figured things out. The problem is we shouldn't have NBA coaches coaching in the Olympics. I don't think it's fair to them because you really have to do your homework. You have to be ready. It's a completely different kind of basketball. The NBA season is long. It's grueling. You don't have the time to put in the work. Coach K, as a college coach, had more time. He did a great, Coach K turned USA basketball, the Redeem team, that carried on several years. Look, we're not going to have the days where the United States blows everybody out because, like you said, there's so many NBA players. Look at the NBA Finals MVP is not American. The league MVP is not American. Luka, and that's not even counting Luka, is not American. There are stars, like not good players, stars all over the world. But the U.S. still has the best team and collection of players. And the other thing that I think has annoyed me with Popovich on these press conferences, and they are only 0-1 in the Olympics because the other two were exhibition losses. But every time he gets offended and mad at the reporter for asking a question like, well, you shouldn't be surprised we lost. Well, sorry, but if it was an NBA game and it was your roster against Nigeria's roster, everyone would be shocked if you lost to Nigeria's roster. I don't care if they do play in the NBA. They're guys that sit on the bench and they're not star players. So I don't think the coaching has been good. He should not. 9 of their last 10 losses, Popovich has been involved in. If that doesn't say he doesn't know what he's doing on the international level, I don't know what does. But he's going to sit there at his next press conference, be a jerk, tell everyone how smart he is and they're dumb, and then he's going to go out and defend himself every time he loses a game. But he obviously isn't doing the job right now.
I will say this in his defense: the way the USA basketball team is put together, they are at a distinct disadvantage in that they don't work together for more than a couple of weeks. They can't get any chemistry. We saw Drew Holiday and company getting off a plane the night before the game against France. So half their team wasn't even there, and so there's never, as opposed to the foreign teams who do get to play together for quite a long time, other than the NBA players that are in there. So they have some sense of chemistry. And so there is that. I don't disagree with anything you're saying. I would like to see a guy like Jay Wright, for instance, being the coach. He's on the bench right now as an assistant.
And he to me would be, a good choice. Somebody.
Hey, he's about the best coach in the country right now.
But I'm tired of hearing about how all these other countries, well, they play together. Well, Luka hasn't been with his guys. Luka had a long season. He shows up, he's putting up almost 50. Stop giving me excuses. At some point, you got to just go shoot the basketball. And there were 3 guys that played in the finals, and I agree, they had to be tired. Yeah. And I actually commend those guys for not backing out. They just went through a grueling final series, and they still kept their commitment and come playing. So, I actually applaud those guys for doing it. But the U.S. still has a collection of players that are better, and I don't like the way that the roster was constructed, and that falls on Popovich. And I don't know if Colangelo is still running or who picks the roster, but they don't have a really good big. Draymond Green and Bam, they're not the traditional big men, and you're seeing better big men on the European teams, but there's always these excuses, and it's like, okay, I'm not expecting them to run the table even and win every game by 30, but they should still win gold. If you compared these rosters in any other competition, let's say it was the NBA, you would say this team should win. And I just feel like now our cop-out is, well, everyone's caught up and we should just expect this. And I'm like, no, I don't think we should. If you have the right coach and he's doing things correctly, I think you should be doing better. Now, they still have time. They can still do this. Their next 2 games, they should win. If they lose to Iran, then there's really something wrong. They're done. But I still think they can still win. I think they're still good enough. It's just in the fourth quarter, that's what we're seeing in these games now, Bryan. The U.S. was up in that game against France by 8 with 4 minutes left, and then they blew it. They have to be better down the stretch. They have to hit some open shots. But yeah, the
Ryan,
days of them rolling everybody is over.
that third quarter, they could not throw it in the ocean. I mean, they had
And you
open
think with
shots.
Durant and Lillard, you would never think that could be possible.
I mean, yeah, and then you watch the other guys just knocking down threes on these other teams. They're just better shooters,
Yeah.
more consistent shooters. I laughed when you talked about Luka, though. But Luka doesn't need to have chemistry with anybody. Luka handles the ball. He creates his own shot. It doesn't matter what four guys are on the floor. And he showed that the other night. He scores 48 against Slovenia, and he's dropped back threes from half court and all this crazy. I mean, the guy's incredible. It's like the international coming out party for Luka Doncic. So good for the Mavericks. One last thing, and we'll get out of here. The NFL got the training camp started. Cowboys are at work right now. The health of the offensive line is phenomenally better. Tyron Smith and Lyle Collins both look like Adonises right now, and they say they feel good. Defense, Micah Parsons is lighting it up, and everybody's loving what he's doing. And they say Leighton Vander Esch has been in the weight room, and he looks terrific. I mean, as Mike McCarthy said today, they won the underwear Super Bowl today. So they haven't hit anybody yet. That's true. But based on just a little bit you've seen, what are some of the things you're hearing? I mean, Aaron Rodgers has gone back to the Packers. What's grabbed your interest about training camp?
For the Cowboys, my thing with training camp, I honestly, and look, I used to be one of the guys that was tweeting play-by-play of training camp all the years. I mean, I covered the Cowboys, the Texans, the Saints, the Chiefs, but I don't really care. Like, especially if you're a fan, all you should care about, especially with the Cowboys, is that offensive line leaves camp healthy. As long as they're healthy and ready to go, there's no major injuries. That's what you should be worried about. I think if the Cowboys offensive line is healthy, I think they easily win that division, in my opinion. We'll see if the health holds. Interesting around the league, though, Aaron Rodgers, Deshaun Watson, we're never coming. They both show up. Now, this sounds like this will be Rodgers' last year in Green Bay, because he will be able to leave next year if he wants to. So Green Bay gets one more shot to win it with them. Deshaun Watson reporting was interesting to me. It looks like right now the league's not going to suspend him, at least right now. So it puts the Texans in a weird position, because you're starting to read that they now are open to trading him, but they want 5 early picks. My thing is, who's going to trade those picks for him, not knowing if he's going to be available? So could Deshaun Watson start week 1? I mean, I never thought in a million years that was possible, and now maybe it is. So that to me was the biggest surprise.
One of the teams that I heard might be interested and might be willing to do this, and may even be willing to take the risk of him not being available this year, might be Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Keep in mind, they took Michael Vick after he got out of jail. So if anybody's got the stomach for dealing with something like this, probably the Eagles might be the team, as shaky as their quarterback situation is right now. You still don't know if Hurts can really get it done or not. But yeah, I mean, the thing that I do believe is the NFL could pull that trigger at any moment and say he's out for half the season or the whole year, because now more women are coming out and now they're filing charges.
With Houston Police Department,
Yes.
yeah. This
So
isn't civil cases.
It's making it even more of a mess. And I quite honestly, I don't see Deshaun Watson being with the Texans when the season starts. I just don't see it. I think it was strictly to keep from getting $50,000 a day fine.
Yeah.
And so I cannot believe that Houston's going to stick with him with all that baggage going on. And I can't believe that they're not going to trade him. But you're right. They're going to want a king's ransom for him. And there's somebody out there that could be dumb enough to do it.
And the Eagles make the most sense, because they have, assuming Wentz plays a certain amount of snaps this year, the Eagles are going to have 3 first-round picks.
Mm-hmm.
So they have the draft capital that they can trade, and they could even, send back a Jalen Hurts in the deal. So that one, and it gets them out of the AFC. So that one to me does make the most sense. But again, is he going to be able to play? How long, if he does get suspended, how long will it be for? But they want to win. And and like you said, they took a chance on Vic. They're going to do what they got to do to win.
It's insane. Anything else on the plate before we wrap it up?
No, I think we covered just about everything.
It's now Wednesday, but it was fun. It was fun. Hey, Ryan, always good to talk to you. Looking forward to visiting with you next week when things are, of course, much calmer. I mean, what more could happen over the course of the next week or two? I will say, though, it has been a fun summer with all this stuff with NIL and all. We haven't even talked about NIL that much, but
yeah,
it's been pretty wild. So look forward to talking to you next week. For those of you watching, the 2 that are left, we had 3, but I think 1 died. So rest in peace. I'm not going to take the hat off because the hair looks terrible. But we do want to ask you to subscribe to the channel, say nice things, tell people about the podcast. And maybe someday we'll get an NIL and we'll get like a $5 deal to, hand out Subway gift cards or something, So just saying. Thanks very much. Hey, Ryan, have a good one, man.
you too.
All right, Bryan and Ryan, and we'll talk to you next week.